Okay, so today we are creating our design for our cushion. Now, we've already done quite a lot of different things, including our title page, our mood board, we've done some mind maps, you might have done some individual research, you might have done some artist research to help you with creating this design for your cushion. Now, the idea is that all of those need to collate together to influence your design. So within your design, I'd like to see some influences from the artist you looked at, for example. Now we're going to use the help sheet provided and we are going to work through the steps step by step. Before, however, we start with that, step number 1 is all to do with creating a few rough doodles to help with your ideas, so you sort of got a bit of an idea before you go and do your final one. Now the idea is that what you can do, I just did these ones earlier, is just draw a few boxes, maybe 4 boxes, and come up with your idea. Now my theme is all to do with underwater, so all of my ideas need to be featuring things to do with the sea and things that you might find underneath the water. So after I've done that one, I've then sort of stuck with my design that I've decided to go with. Now I've chosen to go with the jellyfish design. I think that one was the most interesting out of all of them. Plus, when I looked at my artist research, the artist did some design to do with jellyfish, so I thought that would fit in quite well. Now, I've then experimented a little bit further by creating this one, where I've thought a little bit more about details that could go into this design. Now you can see that I've started thinking about sort of zoomed in sections, so here I've decided to come up with some sequins, etc. So I would get in your head, before you start on to step 2, please get in your head exactly what you want it to look like. So have a look back at some of that research to help you out. Now, I'm using an A3 piece of paper. You are going to use A4. I'm just using a slightly larger one because it's going to go for the wall in my classroom. Okay. Now, to find the middle of your page, what's an easy way to do that is folding your piece of paper in half. Just very lightly press it down and fold it in half again. And that will give you roughly the middle. Now, that will all come out in later on. So I'm just going to mark out for my middle point my square around the outside. Now my idea is that I want this perfectly square, so I need to make sure that my measurements are pretty accurate. So that is about 12 centimetres. I've got to go a little bit bigger. I'm going to go to 16. Okay. And then across from there we're going to go 16. Just draw it lightly with your pencil, so if you make a mistake you can rub it out. Remember where this needs to be square, so if we end up with it not square, it's not going to end up being a very good representation of what we're trying to achieve here, is it? And join those ones up to finish off my square. So there we go, that's roughly my square. Now what I am thinking is that with regards to that, you want to fit your design within that square. You will be given a square piece of material and we are going to focus just on that square, so I wouldn't try and change the shape at all at this point. Okay, so I'm then going to start thinking about what I might want to add onto here. So I'm going to think of some of the textile techniques we're going to do. So I might decide to do some decorative stitching. I might decide to do some applique. Now all of this is on the help sheet. So if you have a look here, there's some information about what you could do. And later on, the help sheet you will see has actually got some examples of some sort of sections and some details that you could also include. Now, from here, I'm going to start drawing it out. Now, you need a sharp lead pencil for this. You need to make sure that you're doing it as you want it to do. So I've got the one I did earlier to just sort of help me out. Now, at the bottom, I'm planning on having bits of sand down here, and I think they will be layered up with different pieces of fabric. And then I would want a bit of the darker colours and some bits of sea here. I'm then going to start creating maybe some rocks sort of that are underneath the sea here. Now remember, you're just doing the outline at the moment, so don't worry too much if it's not 100% right. Get yourself a rubber and rub it out again if you don't like it. Most important thing to remember is try and do this really, really lightly. If you sort of start pressing really hard, it's going to be quite difficult for you to then start rubbing those things out and changing things. Now I'm then going to start drawing my jellyfish. On here, like that. So just roughly how I want it to look. And then from there, I'm going to want some pieces like this coming out and around. Now, because I was thinking that I'd quite like to have these parts as ribbon and I was going to leave them hanging loose, I'm just adding in that detail to show that it's not just a line of thread, that it is actually slightly bigger. So these are my ribbons, like that. Now, when you are then happy with your shape, you can then start adding on a little bit more detail. So you can see on this one here that I sort of said about the sequins. So you could here start adding on your designs for your sequins and where you'd want them to go. Now, I also thought that underneath here, which is this bit here is going to be my section of sand, that I would like bits of sequins underneath there as well. And I wanted them to sort of represent the sand, but also like pebbles at the bottom of the sea as well. Now, my sort of idea for this is that I might add some opaque fabric or see-through fabric over the top and sort of sandwich the sequins underneath them. Could also do that with anything sort of like cling film or something like that. But I'd like you to really think about how you can get texture into your piece of work. Okay, now from here, I'm then going to start thinking about adding in more details, refining my details before then adding my colour. Now, in terms of refining details, what I mean is I might want to go over parts of it to make things slightly bolder, just so I can really see where they're going to go. So, for example, on this rock, I might want to start adding in bits of detail of how I want the rock to look. Now, I want it to look quite jagged, that kind of thing, like you'd expect a rock to look like. I want to refine the edge. Now this would be made out of applique. Remember, applique is all to do with the attaching of a smaller piece of fabric to a larger piece. Now these bits are going to be separate pieces of blue, and I think I'm going to have layers within that. Now I need to just refine my jellyfish a little bit more. Now when I'm saying refine, I'm just going over it. I'm not pressing any harder than I was originally. I'm just going over to just make it a little bit bolder so we can all see exactly where everything needs to go. Okay, so I've gone over my image to just refine it. I've added on these little bits of sequins, etc. that I am planning on doing. Now, before I do anything else, I'm going to think about the different sections. Now, I did mention on the sheet, and I hope you've had a quick look at that, regarding anything to do with making your design as simple as possible but as effective as possible. Now, there's a bit of a risk here that you could make something that's far too complicated and we just simply wouldn't have enough time to be able to do it. You need something fairly simple, but something that you feel confident that you can sort of work with, but it also needs to be something that really shows off your skills without being too complicated. Now, do you remember we did the applique samples? And within those samples, we worked on how we could create a simple shape. And we had sort of examples of ones with bunting and circles and diamonds and heart shapes, etc. So we're really trying to get this refined with detail, yes, but not too much detail that you can't show it off or you just don't get time to finish it, which would be a real shame. So for example, on this one, my kind of idea at the moment is my main focus is the jellyfish. Then my second focus will be the bits down here, the sea and the sand. And then eventually what I will do, my last part will be things like the sequins and the hand sewing stitches. So I'm kind of thinking ahead as to what is my priority before I actually create it. Okay, for the next bit we are going to be using a compass, or if you haven't got a compass you can use something that's round that you can draw around. Now, like we've done on this rough drawing that I did earlier, can you see how I have zoomed in on the section here and I've included sort of an enlarged version to just show the details off. So this one you can see you've got the bits of sequins there. So to give you an example, what you would want is you would like a circle drawn around that can just really showcase what you're trying to do. So I'm going to focus first of all on the rocks down here. Easiest way to do this is get the point of your compass on here and turn your piece of paper around, which would work even better if the compass was a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to have to very, very quickly rub that out a little because it didn't go too well. Now, the idea of this is that you want to zoom in on a section. So, for example, say I was to zoom in on this section here, I would then just add in a couple of lines just so we can sort of see that it's almost like a magnified part of that. Okay, see what I've done there yet? And then within there, what I would then draw is just this section from my smaller drawing, sorry. Now, what you want is to start adding in your designs, your drawings. Now, this is my heat gun kind of section. Now, when I'm using a heat gun, it's all kind of over the place and doesn't necessarily always look quite the same. So that's why I've done that one there. Let me use my compass again. Actually, I might use the glue stick this time. I'm going to zoom in on this part here. So I'm zooming in on just this section. Zoom in on it. Try and use a compass and a ruler if you can, please. And then what you are doing is you are zooming in on the sections on there. So within this bit, what I'm planning on having is lots and lots of sequins that are just actually bunched underneath the fabric, and then over top of there I want some opaque fabric or some see-through fabric or maybe even some cling film that I can then sort of bunch up over the top and have like sort of folds, and I'm going to probably have some stitching lines on there, etc. And let me do one more. Use the compass again this time. And I'm just going to, actually, I will do one of the applique and I will do one of the sequins on here. So let's just do the applique one quickly. There we go. And I'll just quickly draw my circle for the sequins, and I'll do that one over here. Ooh. Now, so this one here is for the top part of this, and this one is for my sequins. So my sequins section is just here, so I will simply zoom in on that section. Okay, so then we've got our zoomed in sections. Now I'm doing this section here, and then I will also do a section up here. Now ideally I would draw that with a compass as well to make it look a little bit neater. Okay, now with this all I'm doing is I'm following this line. Now because this is applique, now we've done applique before in class, we've made samples of it. Now remember, applique has a zigzag stitch across, I don't know if you can see that from there, but zigzag stitch across the edge of the fabric, just like that. And that's just to stop it fraying. So then we've got these bits here, which are my bits for the sequins. So that bit's just going to go roughly like that in my zoomed in section, and then I just need slightly bigger sequins because it's a zoomed in. Haven't quite got enough room for 3, and then I'd add in the dot in the middle, which is where the needle would go through, and with that, like that. Okay, so now I am starting to think about my colours. Now, colour-wise, I have decided that this bit here and this bit here are going to be different varying shades of blue. So with that, what I need is nice sharp pencils. They need to be sharp so that when you're doing it, it's really nice and neat. And when you're rendering, what you need to do is you need to follow the lines that your piece of work is going along. What we don't want is bits of scribbles. We don't want anything that's not going to be neat. So if we do it like this, nice and neatly like that, all in one direction, it's going to come out a lot neater. A lot neater than if we were to do it a little bit like less controlled. Now what's quite nice to also do is, because I'm planning this to be layers of fabric, to sort of add in those bits that I want sort of pleated over. Now I'm doing it fairly lightly, and if I want sections to be a little bit darker, just go back over top of those with that pencil. Now from here you can see that it's mostly coloured in. We've done our zoomed in sections and they are coloured in too. Now if we have a quick look at our help sheet, we are then working on the annotation. So this section here is all to do with the annotation, and then here is some sentence starters. If you'd like to use those, you are welcome to. Now for this one, what I have done is I've already prepared my annotation. I've typed it up. You don't need to type it up, you can just write it out, that's not a problem. Then what you need to do is you are just getting it on and labelling it as to where it needs to go. So for example, this one here, I've kind of grouped it into sections. So I've done layers of the sea, I've done a bit on the jellyfish, etc. And within that I've answered most of the questions that apply to it. So I've done all the things like the techniques I would use, the colours I would use, etc. Now my idea is that I would then put these around the edge, and what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to stick them on, and then I'm just going to draw an arrow reaching from the bit about the jellyfish to the actual jellyfish, and any sort of bits where I'm specifically talking about a certain thing. For example, if I reference the sequins, I would draw it up to the sequins so it's really clear exactly what part I am talking about. Now I will just pop and stick those on. Okay, so the last thing I am going to do is I'm then just going to label all of the techniques that I am planning on including. So, for example, this top one up here, I was going to be making that out of applique. Now I have written it over here, but I just think to make it stand out a little bit more, I am going to just put here that this is applique. Right here with my rocks, I was planning that to be some heat manipulation and like melted plastic bags, etc. So I am just going to label that heat manipulation. We've then got bits of sequins over here and sequins over here. I'm also going to add one more arrow, and I'm going to add that to just add a label for these ribbons and bits of wool for the legs of the jellyfish. Okay, and there you have it. That is what the sort of thing that you're being expected to produce for this final design. Aim is you want to show as much knowledge as possible, keep it fairly simple so it's not too difficult. This is my one, I would probably go back over some of these things. You can highlight around the edge with a fine liner if you want to.